Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Owner's Box After Dark. I am your host, Mark Farinella, the former assistant sports editor, Patriots beat writer, and all about good guy for the Sun Chronicle of Attleboro, Massachusetts, now 2 years into my blessed retirement. And I would just like to point out that this is a pre-recorded beginning to what will be the bulk of this episode, which I've already recorded. So if you notice that I'm wearing something different later on, it's intended that way. This is here in the palatial confines of Fulton Pond Studios in Mansfield, Massachusetts. It gets pretty cold in this room. And I have windows that face a pond, as I said, Fulton Pond. And when we have bad weather, as we're having right now, the wind hits those windows and it radiates cold into this room. So no matter how much I crank up the heat, I tend to think that it may not be warm enough. Well, I cranked it up way high, and I actually struggled with how hot it was. And as you'll see in part of this episode that goes on for quite a while, I was feeling rather warm by the end of it. So I changed out of that for the last segment, but now I'm doing the first segment, and we'll put it all together, and it will make for a wonderful 24th episode of The Owner's Box After Dark. Plenty of things to talk about today. The Patriots played. That's about the best thing I can say about it. The bulk of what this episode will be about is about our upcoming election. Tuesday is election day. Please, folks, if you haven't voted yet, and if you have a ballot in your house, fill it out and take it directly to your polls. Don't put it in the mailbox. It's too late for that, especially in some parts of the country right now where mail is a mess. But I just take it with you, or just bring it with you and just say you want to fill it out while you're there. But go to your polls Tuesday and vote. There has never been a more important election than this one, and I encourage everyone from age 18 to age 800 to go and vote and think about your country as you're doing it, because that's what's most important about this presidential election, is the future of the United States of America. I firmly believe that. And then I think I get into some random comments towards the end of this. And of course, we'll have one of our really fun Japanese commercials. I think I'm running out of those too. I better be careful, but we will have one of those coming up too. So, but first, I just want to say, take a deep breath. You are going to hear me pontificate for the next 18 minutes or so as I offer my pre-election thoughts to you. Please enjoy them. I've been promising for some time an election-related episode, but I've procrastinated a little, probably because commenting upon a presidential election brings my thoughts back to a very painful time. In fact, this same time 4 years ago, when I believed with all my heart that this nation would never elect a coarse and unqualified individual, the likes of Donald J. Trump, to the highest office in the land. Reviewing my past Facebook posts on the topic also reminded me of my unbridled optimism that history would be made and that the glass ceiling for a qualified woman would be shattered into a million pieces. But all the while, a female friend of mine repeatedly told me that Trump would be elected president. She didn't support Trump, not in the slightest. But she fully believed that there was no chance that America would elect Hillary Clinton, or any other woman for that matter. Men would not allow it, she said. And of course, she was proven correct. The polls favored Clinton's candidacy right up to the last minute. And in a way, they were correct. The former First Lady, U.S. Senator from New York and Secretary of State, received nearly 66 million votes to Trump's 63 million. But the margins in states such as Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, and Florida were such that Trump gained the advantage in electoral college votes, and thus the presidency. For the second time in the last 5 elections, the winner of the popular vote was denied the office because of an antiquated electoral process conceived in the 1780s as a compromise to smaller states that feared they would lose slavery as the bulwark of their economic systems if the more populous northern states were given a mandate by vote totals. Now, there's a lot I could say about the Electoral College, none of it good, but I'd prefer to get to the meat of the matter first. If you know me, if you follow my social media posts or these podcasts, you know where I stand. I received my official ballot in the mail on the first day they were available, and I dropped it in the mail slot inside my local post office that same afternoon. I proudly voted for the Democratic Party ticket of former Vice President Joe Biden and California U.S. Senator Kamala Harris, and I would encourage you to do the same. This is not to say that I am a signed and sealed Democrat, or some would like to put it, a radical left libtard. I voted in 12 presidential elections in my lifetime, choosing 9 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 independent. 7 times I voted for the eventual winner, 5 of those Democrats and 2 Republicans. And 9 times I voted for the winner of the popular vote, even though 2 of those candidates failed to win the presidency. Generally, I like to think of myself as open-minded to what members of the GOP might have to say. I voted for Republicans in statewide and local elections. I voted for Governor Charlie Baker here in Massachusetts, and I voted for Republican state representatives that have held the offices in the wildly gerrymandered towns in which I've lived since returning home from college in 1976. But this year, the GOP paid a price on my ballot. For the first time that I can remember, I voted straight Democrat up and down the ballot in every race, no matter how insignificant, or regardless of whether I knew the candidate or not, because I felt that I had to exact a penalty from the GOP for its failed leadership of the last 4 years. Let me make this perfectly clear, as a former president and former Republican of some note might have said many years ago. I do not like Donald Trump, not in the slightest. I have believed he was a fraudulent creation of the pop culture media since the mid-1980s, and I took it personally when his ownership of the New Jersey Generals of the United States Football League caused the league's demise before the 1986 season. Now, for those of you who don't remember the USFL, it was formed in 1983 as a means of capitalizing upon the skyrocketing success of pro football at the time. The league played its games in the springtime, not competing directly with the established NFL, and it played a wide-open and fun-to-watch style of football that was reminiscent of the old American Football League. Trump, meanwhile, had wanted to be a member of the NFL ownership club for many years, but he could never convince the old guard of NFL owners to accept him in their midst. And what does that tell you? That the morally questionable owners of the NFL thought Trump was too sleazy even for them? Trump retaliated by becoming majority owner of the Generals. He threw all sorts of money at players like Doug Flutie and Herschel Walker, and then he seized upon the terminal illness of the USFL's commissioner to convince the other owners to plan for a fall season in 1986, competing head-to-head with the NFL. A lot of people thought that was going to be suicide for the league, and it proved to be so, even though they never played a single contest. Trump sued the NFL for being a monopoly, and he actually won, but he was awarded only $3 in damages. He's tried and failed to become an NFL owner at least 2 more times. He put out feeler for the Patriots prior to Robert Kraft's purchase of the team, and more recently, he tried to buy the Buffalo Bills. Now, granted, that's not a significant enough reason to object to Trump's candidacy for the presidency, but it is part of a recurring theme of underhanded dealings, brazen promises never fulfilled, and never taking responsibility for his own actions, all of which we have witnessed over and over during these past 4 years. 4 years ago, I wrote all these things every night in Facebook posts. I said Trump would be unfit for an office that required far more intelligence and humanity than he was prepared to offer. And it all came true. You know his history. He was born with a silver spoon wedged up his ass, and he lived as a willing participant in the privilege afforded him by his father's wealth. According to members of his own family, he paid other individuals to take his college admissions tests for him. his father found doctors willing to claim that young Donald had bone spurs that would keep him safe from the military draft. And as a real estate tycoon, and that's an image more of the media's creation than by any measure of his own acumen, he repeatedly bankrupted his businesses and stiffed everyone, from contractors to rank-and-file employees and maintenance staff, for the payments due them. Let's also not forget that he is of questionable moral fiber. He has cheated on every one of his 3 wives, including the current mail-order bride from Slovenia. And, of course, you all know the most recent instance, which required a well-publicized 6-figure hush money payment to an actress in the pornographic film industry. Trump has been caught on tape telling an interviewer that he can grab willing women by their private parts because of the aura of his wealth. He repeatedly spouts racist rhetoric and lies without any hint of shame on a daily basis. And his spineless enablers in the Republican Party follow in lockstep behind him. Even his wife has no shame. She was exposed in a recent recording as having said, and I quote, "Fuck Christmas," while decrying her responsibility to decorate the White House during the holiday season. But the evangelicals still love them. Is Trump an evil man or just stupid? Many of his former cabinet members say it's the latter. But I'm willing to suggest that there's some of the former involved as well. But above all else, he is a spectacularly selfish man that has used his office as a vehicle for further self-enrichment. I'm also flabbergasted that so much of his base, the flag-waving yahoos from the states that would not survive on their own if not for the income they draw from the hard-earned taxes paid in the blue states, I'm surprised they aren't up in arms over Trump's love and envy directed towards dictators such as Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. It's not that he supports them. He clearly wants to be them. He wants to be an omnipotent dictator whose word is gospel to the masses. If you wonder why people dredge up comparisons to Adolf Hitler when speaking of Trump, just read your history books and you'll realize it's not as far-fetched as you may think it is. But the true genius of the Trump phenomenon is that his handlers and operatives accurately judged the state of our deeply divided nation. They reasoned that Trump could tell the masses whatever lie would suit the moment, as long as it made them feel better about their own pathetic lives. And they would buy it. No matter how ridiculous the lies might be, there was a sordid underbelly of lesser-educated and prejudiced people lurking beneath the surface, as they say, and they were primed to embrace a message that they had no one else to turn to other than Trump to restore their lost privilege. Even with all that in mind, I could dismiss it and still feel comfortable about not wanting the Trump administration to continue in regard to their policies alone. At the top of the list is his response to the coronavirus pandemic. It has been a complete failure from day one, and sadly, maybe about 230,000 Americans have lost their lives because of it, and more to come. From the moments when Trump said the virus would go away to claiming he was ahead of the curve by stopping travel from China, although it was long after it would have had any effect, he has touted false theories of cures that were worthless. He has denied science and treated the experts on his task force with open disdain. And he continues to promise vaccines that are still months away from realization. He promised a vaccine before the election. The election's on Tuesday. No vaccine yet, as far as I know. Trump also ignores science when it's involved in climate change. He has attempted to roll back almost every bit of environmental legislation passed by his predecessor, Barack Obama, partially out of spite towards Obama, whom he just absolutely hates. And part of it is to further enrich his friends in the cash-flush oil industry who prop him up. Trump has failed to disclose his income tax returns, as every president since Richard Nixon has done, leaving it to investigative reporters to reveal that the so-called billionaire president is more than $400 million in debt. To whom, we ask? We don't know for sure, but signs certainly point toward the Russian oligarchs with whom he and his family have had business dealings. And Trump's packing of the Supreme Court with reactionary conservative justices could affect the country for decades down the road, and almost immediately are certain to put women's rights to reproductive freedom in jeopardy. The list of Trump's failings goes on, and it sickens me to even consider repeating any more of them. Any one of them by themselves would have disqualified him for higher office maybe 20 years ago. You may recall Democrat Howard Dean whooped in joy during a post-primary speech, and America stopped taking him seriously as a candidate from that moment on. But Trump will allow various degrees of shit to pour out of his mouth every day, and people just shrug and say, well, that's him. More than anything else, Trump's behavior shows a history of projection. What he accuses others of doing is most likely something he has done himself or that his family has done. For instance, he accuses Joe Biden of running a family-based criminal organization, but he conveniently puts aside his own history of fraudulent enterprises, or the patents that daughter Ivanka obtained from China for her clothing line that would not have been available to her if not for her political privilege, or son Eric's uses of funds intended for a children's charity for personal use, and so on, and so on. Look, here's the deal. Joe Biden might not have been my personal choice as the Democratic Party's nominee. But one thing I can't deny is that the man has the political experience and savvy that Trump does not. And he has a quality for empathy that is not at all present in Trump's DNA. Joe Biden is a moderate candidate and not the puppet of the liberal left, as Trump hates him to be. Biden understands personal loss, and he channels that when he considers what his course will be in governing. And I do believe that he has made a solid choice in Kamala Harris as vice president. Because if indeed he is fated to be only a one-term president, as he will be 82 years old in 2024, Senator Harris will be very well prepared to be the standard bearer of a party that also has several promising young leaders ready to step up and support her. Biden will also work to restore the shattered relationships with our allies, who felt cast aside by Trump's self-contradicting America First policy that nonetheless offered unprecedented access to enemy dictators. But even if Joe Biden is elected on Tuesday, and I fear that Trump's efforts to delegitimize the vote will delay that result, the deep division within our country is not going to magically disappear immediately. Even as I was writing this, long lines of trucks filled with Trump supporters blocked lanes on the Garden State Parkway in New Jersey and on the Governor Mario Cuomo Bridge over the Hudson River in New York. And why? Maybe because at one of the presidential debates, Trump told his white supremacist followers to stand back and stand by. Makes me wonder to what extent these extremists will attempt to discourage voters from heading to the polls on Tuesday. And by the way, if you are the victim of any sort of voter suppression efforts on Tuesday, anywhere, you can bring it to the attention of poll workers or to local law enforcement. You can call the American Civil Liberties Union's Election Protection Hotline at 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Let me repeat that. 1-866-OUR-VOTE. Or you can call the U.S. Department of Justice's Voting Rights Hotline at 1-800-253-3931. Again, 1-800-253-3931. We have a long way to go to heal our wounds. And I just believe that we will be in a better position to begin that process by eliminating the racism, misogyny, and xenophobia of Donald Trump from a position of leadership. And at the same time, it would help if we could take the GOP out of a position of power and flip at least 4 or 5 Senate seats. But that's something we can't control here in Massachusetts. We can only control our own voice. And by the end of the day Tuesday, I'm sure it will be blue. But my individual vote is probably worth 1/1000th as much as a voter's in Wisconsin because of the archaic institution called the Electoral College. And that's an issue I'd like to see a Democratic administration address once and for all after this election. It would take a constitutional amendment to achieve, and that might take years. But the United States of America in 2020 is being hamstrung by adhering to unamended laws established in the 18th century. The bottom line, I voted for Joe Biden because he is a human being. I have a lot of trouble applying that same status to a hate-filled individual such as Donald Trump. I ask you to consider an individual's humanity before the intensity of his rhetoric, before you fill in that empty circle on Tuesday. And we'll be back with more of the podcast after this break. Hello and welcome back to the Owner's Box After Dark. Yes, I am wearing a different shirt. I actually cranked up the heat in here a lot, and as I went through that, was about 17, 18-minute soliloquy of mine, and it got a little warm, so I figured I would crank down the heat. We have a very nasty storm going on outside right now, and sort of makes this this particular area of my establishment, my Fulton Pond Studios, a little bit cooler than everywhere else in the house. So I'm feeling a little bit better about that now, and if you might hear the storm blowing every now and then, but I don't think you will. I think it'll be fine. I just thought I'd run through a couple of quick things, as I would prefer for this episode to be a little shorter than usual. And, of course, one thing we will go into right now, at this very minute, will be the result of today's game between the New England Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. The final score was Buffalo 24, the Patriots 21. The first time in 9 years that the Bills have actually beaten the Patriots at whatever they're calling that stadium now in Orchard Park, New York. I probably went to quite a few of those games myself, and as I was chatting with some of my friends who were also watching the game, I kind of missed those trips to Buffalo, and you would be very surprised why. It's not necessarily Buffalo. There's nothing to it. In fact, I never stay in Buffalo. I used to stay at the Marriott in Amherst. Or Amherst, as they say out there, not like they say here in Massachusetts, where the University of Massachusetts is. That's at Amherst. They call it Amherst, which is a suburb of Buffalo, and also where Rob Gronkowski grew up. But we don't care about that anymore since he's not a Patriot. We'd stay at that Marriott. We'd go to a restaurant called Duff's for buffalo wings, best wings in the world. I am convinced of it. Everybody talks about the Anchor Bar in downtown. That's a tourist trap. Duff's is just a dive, basically. And the wings are terrific. And I remember I would also enjoy getting what they called a beef on weck sandwich. Now, a weck is a bun. It's kind of a soft bun with a very intensely salted top. And the beef was sliced roast beef, as you might think, very, very tasty. And they would just put it in that bun with a little beef juice in there and this highly salted thing. And that would just go down as a great accompaniment to a plate of maybe 15 to 20 wings, because you could just eat the wings and they would be incendiary. And the beef on weck, or the Labatt's that we'd all order to go along with it, would kind of put out the fire a little bit. And I used to love those trips. In fact, I would get extra orders, and especially when the game would be over, and I'd get in the rental car and drive back to the hotel, and I'd pick up an order from Duff's on the way back and chow down just before going to bed. Let me tell you, when you wake up at 6 o'clock in the morning to get a flight, and you have a belly full of Duff's hot wings in your stomach, well, let's just say we had some interesting trips back to the Commonwealth because of that. Anyway, today's game looked like it was going to be a blowout right from the start. And then the Patriots worked hard to get back into it, but also the Bills were being the Bills, and they weren't particularly playing like the so-called juggernaut that they were supposed to be. In fact, they've hit some hard times recently, and now they are still leading the division, but they are now, I believe, 6-3, I think it is. Whatever they are, the Patriots are 2-5 now, and that's the worst record they've had at this juncture of a season since the bad old days, practically. So, I guess I'm trying to find what good things to bring out of, because let's face it, they were on track to at least forcing overtime or to maybe even winning the game when, at the end of the contest, they were on a drive. They had gotten down inside, really about the 10-yard line or so. And, I'm sorry, not quite that far. They were 2nd and 10 at the 19 with 37 seconds left. Well within Nick Folk's range for what would be the game-tying field goal, even with wind issues and everything in that stadium. It was looking pretty good. But Cam Newton, bless his soul, took off for a run off left tackle. He had gotten about 5 yards and looked like there was going to be plenty more in store there when he was hit by defensive tackle Justin Zimmer, and the ball popped out, and Zimmer went right to the turf and recovered it with 31 seconds left, and that was all she wrote. In fact, if you watched the video, if you watched the CBS broadcast, and you saw, I think legitimately there were tears forming in Newton's eyes as he was coming off the field, because he knew that was a squander, a big-time squander, and there have been lots of them in his return to the NFL with the Patriots, and the record is an indication. Now, I'm trying to find some good things out of this, and among them, I guess there are a few here. First of all, running back Damian Harris will have everybody saying Sony who, I guess, because today the second-year veteran carried 16 times for 102 yards. He had a 22-yard touchdown run. And I would think that he's showing that he is going to put up a serious challenge for the starting running back's job whenever whatever has to be resolved in the future is resolved, whether Michelle comes back or if he's released or whatever. I mean, I think Harris is putting in his bid right now, and we'll see what that happens. Jacoby Myers, the former free agent wide receiver, the guy who everybody got so excited about in last year's training camp, and then he disappeared because he got on Tom Brady's poop list. I cleaned that up for you. Well, right now he is Cam Newton's binky. That's clear. I mean, I in fact even commented that I said it was starting to look like Bledsoe to Coates, only not as successful. But and kind of a little bit like Brady and Edelman, I guess. Or Brady and Welker during the previous times. But the fact is that he caught 6 of the 10 passes thrown at him, and that is a career high for catches in the game. He had 58 yards, and he looks like he's gaining confidence. So maybe, just maybe, a career is actually being born now. Who knows? Newton, well, it was another Newton-esque day, really. 15 for 25 for 174 yards passing. No touchdowns, no interceptions, 81.1 passer rating. He also carried 9 times for 54 yards, and he had a touchdown, which now brings him up to 64 rushing touchdowns, which is the best in the National Football League in history. But that fumble, oh, my mercy, that fumble. And cornerback J.C. Jackson had his 3rd interception in the last 3 games. And that's something to be looked at, especially as we consider what the future may be for some of the other cornerbacks on the roster. Now, Josh Allen of the Bills didn't really kill them. Well, he obviously is pretty good. There's no question about it. But he completed 11 of 18 for 154 yards. No touchdowns, 1 interception. That was the one by Jackson. And his passer rating was, I think, 65.5, or maybe that's a 3. I don't know if I can read my own writing. The Bills also got 190 rushing yards, so the Patriots' run defense didn't do that great a job. But it's just that they don't have that mojo right now. You don't see that confidence in the team that will lead them to those come from behind victories. This is the second time this year that a potential late victory or even a tie to send in overtime just failed. Did not happen. So everybody was saying, well, Tom Brady would have led them to victories. Well, maybe not. I don't know. You look at some of the talent on this roster, and I use the word talent loosely. Maybe even Brady couldn't have led this team to a record over 500. So right now they are still on course for my prediction, or actually, in a way, I said 8-8 at the beginning of the year. It's been amended to 7-9 because of the loss to the Broncos. This was one of the earlier in the season picks I made that would be an L, and I expect them to beat the New York Jets next week, because the Jets, no matter how bad the Patriots may look, the Jets are awful. They are just absolutely awful. So I think the Patriots have a decent chance to at least stay on that course. 7-9, all things considered, may not be so bad. I did get a kick, however, out of some of the questioning today. In all deference to Stacey James, the media relations director of the Patriots, and he and I had a up and down relationship over the years, but I respect the guy immensely, and he's done the best job he can, given that he is, obviously has to be the company spokesman, so to speak. But sometimes I wonder why he allows some of the people to ask questions. There's this one guy, I won't say who he is because I don't need to humiliate him, but he asked the dumbest questions in the world, and he doesn't even write them in the newspaper he works for. Doesn't even write stories after. He just gets on the line. He must still get the press releases, as I do. I get them, but I'm not going to call up and ask questions because I'm not covering the damn game. If I was covering the game, I would ask questions. If I'm not covering the damn game, and if you're not writing a story in the next day's newspaper, then don't ask questions, and especially not stupid questions. But I can't. I'm not going to comment on that because it's just not. That's mean-spirited of me. Except I already have. And there was this one other guy who I don't particularly care for. He's one of those guys that thinks that his feces does not smell. And he was the first to ask the question, of course, are you going to go forward with Cam Newton as your quarterback, or are you thinking of giving Jarrett Stidham the reins for the rest of the season? And I'm sitting there in the television. I said, first of all, Bill Belichick, who's still wearing his mask up to his eyes in the Zoom interview that they have, they're not even doing these things in person, obviously. And you could tell, if you could see the scowl on his face through the mask, you could, because, he's not going to tell this particular guy if he's going to make a change. He might tell someone else on the beat that he trusts or that has a little bit more experience. And even then, he wouldn't come out and say it per se. And even though Bill's been a little chatty this year, he's been surprisingly chatty with some people here and there. But you could just see, if you couldn't see it through the mask, but you just knew that he had a gold standard scowl on his face when that question was asked. And he said, Cam's our quarterback, and that's the way it's been all year. And I don't expect it to be any different, to be honest. I don't think he's going to pull the plug on Cam at this point, because I don't think he's seen any progress from Stidham from last year, to be honest. And that's a very disappointing aspect of this whole season, because you may recall, a lot of us thought that Jarrett Stidham was the automatic successor to Tom Brady once Brady left to go to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I just get a kick out of these, because you just know that Belichick would sooner have hot lead poured up his backside than to have to sit through these things. But he does it, and since we can't see the scowl, we can see the eyes, though, and there's usually there's a little dark piece of coal in the middle of those eyes that you know that you're not being favored when you ask that question. So the question is now, do the Patriots become buyers or sellers as we approach the trading deadline this week? A lot of questions about Stephon Gilmore. He did not play because of a knee injury that apparently was suffered in practice this week. But he has put his Foxborough house up for sale, kind of like Brady did when everybody's saying, oh, no, he's not going to leave. He's just going to have another apartment with Giselle in New York or something like that. He'll rent something. He'll commute. He'll be happy. Yeah, well, that didn't happen. I don't know. You look at things. Maybe there's something below the surface that we don't know about. But it does not appear that, well, first of all, Gilmore's not having the season he had last year. Last year, he was unquestioned one of the best cornerbacks in the game, if not the best. And this year, no, he's not. And I think there's a lot of issues afoot, and maybe there might be a few issues, maybe with the coaching. I don't know. So will he be traded this week? Might. What about David Andrews? A lot of people like him. A lot of people were happy he came back from the broken thumb that he had earlier this year. But he's a guy that they could probably ship out to somebody and get some high draft picks maybe, or relatively high. Joe Thuney, excellent offensive lineman. Maybe the most versatile guy they have on the line. But contract coming up. May want to get rid of him. I don't know. Patriots haven't been in this position since for 20 years, at least 20 years. And it's very interesting to see how the fandom is reacting to it. And my question is also, if this lasts very long and the Patriots are not competitive quickly, first question is, how long will Belichick stay with it? Remember, he's a few years older than I am, so he's going to be 70 soon. And it's an awful lot of commitment of time, energy, and whatever. And I don't know how many Subway commercials can get him through a whole season of football if he has to continue as he ages, as we all age. Let's face it, things get tougher to do when you get older. The other thing I wonder about is that will the fans, fickle as they can be, will they desert the Patriots? Will those restaurants and bars over in Patriot Place suddenly become empty because fans don't want to support a sucky team that's playing in the stadium next door? I wouldn't put it past New England's fandom to be very fickle and to desert the Patriots if there's a extended period of suckitude, as they say. So a lot of questions that can be asked right now that don't have answers. The immediate answers will come this week in regards to whether the Patriots start shipping out talent. A lot of people say they don't think they will, and I kind of agree with them. I think they will. I think they'll kind of hold and roll for the rest of the season. It is a difficult schedule, but there are teams right now that are fading from what I thought they might be. I think both Los Angeles teams, before, obviously, the Patriots have to go out to Los Angeles, and they stay there. They have a Sunday game and a Thursday game in that stretch, Chargers and Rams. And I felt at first that was like Death Valley, but now I'm not so sure. Maybe they can sneak one of those away. I don't know. But yeah, there's still a lot of tough games on the schedule. Miami is a much tougher team now than originally thought. So could be a really awful season, folks. I hope you're enjoying it. And remember, watch the fifth quarter after the games. See how long they can milk that. And with that, I think we will conclude our pre-election episode of The Owner's Box. After dark. I hope the dark will not be as dark as Joe Biden has said it might be this winter. I'm a little worried. One thing to watch out for in this coming week, we may have the report from the Massachusetts EEA, the Department of Energy and Environmental Affairs, and they are the ones that are calling the shots on what alterations are being made in sports, or even recommendations if winter high school sports can even be played. The pandemic numbers have gone up, and a lot of people are afraid of that. A lot of people are afraid that there will be newer restrictions coming from Governor Baker for everything, from restaurants to you know what. As we're going through it again, folks. So buy your toilet paper now, I guess. In fact, maybe I need to get a roll or two. I made it through okay. I got plenty of hand sanitizer. Should pick up maybe another package of TP if perhaps that's possible. And, by the way, had a COVID test on Friday. And, no, I'm sorry. Yes, it was Friday. And by Saturday, about 10 a.m., I guess, I got a message on my phone. The test came through negative, so I am now 2 for 2 in negative tests for COVID-19. You ain't got me yet. Take that, coronavirus. And I haven't even taken any of those stupid drugs that Donald Trump claims are good for you. And I haven't gargled with Clorox, and I haven't shot a light up my ass yet. So, doing my damnedest, folks. I'm doing my damnedest to stick around. So, thank you all for being here. Just remember, if you would like to look for all my podcast links, audio and video, they are available along with other exciting content on my website, which is at www.theownersbox2020.com. You can send me an email commenting upon anything I've said tonight, and I said a lot. I'm willing to accept those emails at theownersbox2020@gmail.com. And yes, snail mail is accepted. And the address for that, as always, is the Owner's Box, Post Office Box 272, Mansfield, Massachusetts, 02048. I've got some plans for guests. Again, I know I keep promising that, but I am really working on that, especially as we get closer to the high school season. I do want to talk to some of my friends about what restrictions may be in effect, and hopefully there will be games. I know everybody's planning for it, but we're all sitting on pins and needles about that. So let's hope for some good results on that, and we will definitely hope to get everything going. And maybe I can get back behind the microphone again and call sports that I really know something about, as opposed to soccer and field hockey. But I did enjoy doing that. I really did. So once again, folks, thank you for joining me here on this maybe a little triggered episode of The Owner's Box After Dark. And as always, good night, everybody.